Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
What's happening in the dental industry right now? Well, I could hit you with a bunch of facts, figures, and statistics, which I did back in episode 141, the state of the dental industry, where I went over dental demographics, the supply of dentists between dental school and whatnot, the labor market, and how inflation was affecting offices, as well as corporate dentistry. But, with all of these things, how does it affect the individual doctor in private practice? Well, in order to know that, you have to talk to individual doctors in private practice. And funnily enough, this is something that we do quite a bit of. To that end, we speak to at least 5,000 dentists a year here from MGE, from our expansion division. And that doesn't even count the doctors that are attending all of our lectures. So we end up we've been doing this for over 20 years, we keep our finger on the proverbial pulse per se, as to what's actually going on out there and what the biggest problems are. So what are the biggest problems that individual doctors are having right now? And more importantly, what should you or they, if you don't count yourself amongst those, if you're not having any problems, what should you be doing about them? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host, and I'm joined this week by Jeff Santone, our Vice President for Expansion. Now, Jeff's been a guest on the podcast several times in the past, so if you've been listening for a while, you know Jeff. Jeff, we have you connected over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't ask if you are connected because I know, because, I watched you get connected. I'm going to keep saying that. Eventually, that's just going to die. Mm-hmm. But anyway, just a little bit about Jeff. Jeff has been our Vice President for Expansion for over 4 years. Actually, no longer, since 2019. 5 years. Wow, almost 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be 6 years in January. And Jeff actually owned 2 practices and was a client before he came to MGE. So he's been on both ends here. He's seen it from the client end as well as the MGE end. And, you guys are the ones leading the charge, so to speak. So you're the ones speaking to your division, 5,000 plus doctors per year. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've started kind of keeping track of what the biggest problems are, and you keep track of it in our computer software. We were talking about this the other day, is why I thought it'd make a great episode. When you brought it down to the top 3, one of them actually surprised me a lot.
Yeah.
One did not, but it's become a bigger problem. But I thought that'd be a great episode for us to just sit here and talk about these, as well as give the people listening some suggestions about what to do about them, because chances are one of these 3 things are negatively affecting them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But anyway, welcome to the show. Thanks. Welcome back.
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me. I love being here. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this. So you have 3 problems. Why don't we just go down each individually rather than throwing all 3 out in the beginning?
Okay.
This makes people have to continue to listen.
I like that.
No, I'm kidding. Anyway, but what's the number one issue? Because you talk to a lot of doctors.
Yeah.
What's the number one issue these folks are running into right now?
Right now, number 1 is insurance and profitability.
Now, is it profitability and insurance, or profitability or insurance?
I think they're kind of connected.
Okay.
With what have we seen over the past 4 years? 22% increase
in inflation.
Yeah. And that's on a basket of goods that, if anybody watches, it's not really important. But they do know that if I talk to a lot of guys, I'm like, hey, what are you paying your hygienist? What were you paying them before the pandemic? $30. What are you paying them now? $45.
Yeah, I've seen worse too. I've seen 65.
I've seen worse.
So you're running into this with because again, if this is the number one answer, so to speak, there's probably some people listening who are having this problem, right? And what percentage of folks you're talking to actually take insurance, or at least participate to some degree?
I would say 80%.
Okay. So if they're in insurance and they're seeing no increase in reimbursement or a reduction in reimbursement,
right,
they're obviously feeling it with that 22% inflation.
Yeah.
And how has this affected them personally?
They've had to give up that money from their own pocket, so they're stressed. Mm-hmm. They don't see how they can make it go forward, and they're scared of dropping the insurances, so they don't see kind of a way out.
Has anybody that you've talked to tried and succeeded, or?
There are, yes. So they are trying. Yeah. They're trying, and it's fun. It's fine and it's fun. And I think some guys have just gotten so fed up that by the time I talk to them, they're like, "We've already written our letters. We need a way of handling our patients' concerns." And like, good for them for doing that. It's not the way I would have suggested of doing it, but I think some of them are just so fed up with the discounts and their increased costs that they have no choice at this point. You know, they've given up as much money as they possibly can give up of their own, and it's gotten to their break-even point personally for them and their families, and they're like, I can't go any lower, so I have no choice but to drop some of these insurances. So we've seen that happen, and a lot of times I'll talk to a doctor when they're already into that process of writing their letter, and they're now waiting their 90 days, their 60 days. So,
do you catch guys at the other end? Like, I dropped it, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? My patients don't want to come back, like that type of a thing?
I've only got like one or two of those where they've like, oh my goodness, we dropped it, and it's been a disaster. But typically I don't hear from many guys that have dropped it, and you know, I wouldn't know. I guess I haven't had the conversation.
So more or less, it's, you know, hey Jeff, so what's your biggest problem or source of stress? Well, I just can't handle these insurances. My costs are going up, and things of that nature. Yeah.
So it's insurance, and that leads to their profitability issue. But it's funny when you talk to them, they don't see it's possible to get out. They're still talking to me about negotiations and raising their fees, and it's funny. So we just had this brand new doctor, great couple, and they're about to open their scratch practice. They've been doing it for a while, and they're like, hey, we're getting credentialed, and can you take a look at this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, yeah, please send it to me. Sure. So I'm not going to name the insurance. It's a big insurance. So
I think they're all big insurances.
They're all big insurance. Well, some are bigger than others, you know.
True.
Yeah, but
and I know you're a big Delta fan.
Oh, I'm a huge Delta fan.
Yeah, I know.
Don't even get me started.
Don't ever ask Jeff about Delta. He'll go off for an hour about the
executive.
It's a nonprofit. And the executive compensation.
$5.1 billion, and it's insane, you know. But anyway, so they hired a company to do negotiations.
Okay.
Right. And I thought, okay, well, that doesn't really work, but that's fine. Send me the data. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting. I was like, these sneaky insurance companies. So they sent them back their first offer. Like the insurance sent this doctor their first offer. And what they didn't do was attach the UCR. So they said, look, here's our first offer. And they gave a random list of codes. They didn't give all of them, right? But then they totaled them at the bottom. And it was something like $6,500 for these 10 codes that they gave. And it's a good comparison.
That was the new offer?
That was the first offer.
What were they currently getting for those codes?
$12,000.
Wait. So they were currently getting, their full fee was $12,000.
Yeah.
And they weren't participating yet because they were just opening this practice.
Yeah.
So the insurance's proposal was almost a 50% haircut, $6,500.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this negotiation company goes back and like, we're not going to take it. And
that doesn't even sound like a negotiation.
It doesn't even say
like 50% is just what they're going to give you anyway.
Yeah. So then they offer. So then they send it again with their like new proposed offer compared to their original offer, which was like 20. So it was like $8,500 now.
Okay, so it went from $6,500 to $8,500. Full fee was $12,000.
Yeah. So it was but since they're leaving their fees out, it looks like, look, we got you a 25% increase in the fee. It was still a 38% discount off of their fee schedule. Like, it was insane. I was just like, wow, that is so good. That is very smart. Like, from an insurance company point of view, I was like, wow, that really does make them look good. Like, look, we just got this 25% increase in your fee. Like,
I mean, the fact that there's an industry that does that now, like that industry did not exist because, you know, I've been in the industry now since the first Clinton administration. Yeah, there you go. Back then, PPO proliferation was minimal. They were just starting to come on, right? And the idea that there'd be a company who would be the interface or the intermediary between you and the insurance company was like, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad business. It's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, too, what was I looking at the other day? Because you also have companies now that will file your insurance for you.
Yeah.
There was one that just got bought a couple of years ago by Shine. Shine also bought a fee negotiation company. Like, this is, everybody, the big fish are gobbling up the little fish, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that there'd have to be a company to do that It just shows you, like, I'm not saying that that's wrong or that's bad. I think we even have a couple of those companies in our GPO, our buying group,
Right.
That do fee negotiation. It's shameless plug time. The MGE, we have a buying group, excellent buying group, by the way, called DDS Overhead Management. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. It's for MGE clients only. Great discounts. Anyway, quality products, too.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. Was that good?
That was fine.
Okay,
It makes
good.
sense.
Thank you.
You only got to compete.
Had to throw it in there. So I don't fault that business, but the fact that you have to, like, so if I'm taking insurance, wouldn't it just be easier if you think, I'm just not going to take this? And then you're right. I can see that you're talking to guys and they're going, well, I just can't see my way out of it.
Yeah.
And I should probably do another episode on getting out of plans.
Yeah.
Because we've had a lot of clients get out now.
Yeah.
But then what's funny, the more recent thing Sabri's had people doing, which I just thought was really smart, was usually where people are going to notice that you've dropped their plan the most is with preventive and diagnostic procedures. So cleanings, x-rays, right, exams. So what she's had a few clients do was basically lower their hygiene fees to whatever the PPO fee was from the biggest PPO they had.
Makes sense.
So if it was like cleaning bite wings and a periodic exam, let's say out of network was, and it's the out of network fee that she had them lower it to. So let's say the out of network reimbursement is $212 and the full fee is like $314, right? So she just had them lower their hygiene fees across the boards to $212.
Yeah.
Now on the plus side, for those patients, because if you look at it, the procedures you're going to do the most of are going to be preventive and diagnostic procedures. Nothing changed for them. And if you're doing basic or major, they're expecting to pay something.
Right.
That's built into the mindset. If I'm going to get a crown done, I know there's going to be out-of-pocket cost associated with that. So then she has them raise their other fees, basic and major fees, up to normal fee for their zip code. So the crowns might go from $865 in network to $1,500 now because that's what it costs there. And that's been pretty effective.
If people don't notice a difference and they do want to stay with their dentist, I mean, that's the other big thing. There's this fear that everyone's just going to walk out because you don't take, which
Most
isn't
people
true.
Will.
No,
it's 70% of people will stay, except with Delta.
Yeah.
Because Delta, again,
sends
really
some
goes
weird
after people.
Yeah, they really make it obvious. But it's just, you can play that game and it's well worth it. In my opinion, though, the idea that, like you're saying, like negotiation companies occur and exist for a reason. Like somebody's doing it. But I've never seen anybody get a fee negotiated to an amount that's an acceptable discount.
Right. And I guess that would be the real thing would be what would be an acceptable discount.
Would be an acceptable discount?
For me, 10%.
Yeah. And then the thought of it is that, well, next year we're going to have inflation at another 5% or 4% or 3%.
Sure.
Like you're not getting they're not going to bump you again.
No.
Like you're going to get this one time and they're going to pick and choose what fees. And I've seen them where they're willing to negotiate. They're like, look, I'm going to bump you up here, but I'm going to lower this here because I have to stay in my total of $8,000.
Right.
So I mean, I remember playing those games and it just at the end of the day, it isn't worth it. So there's that idea of like a lot of the doctors we talk to, it's like, hey, can we negotiate? And I'm like, not really. I'm like, most of them don't really negotiate, not to a level that's
I mean,
acceptable.
they will. They'll 6,500 to 8,500. But they were already planning on going.
They
to
were already doing.
8,500.
They already knew what their top was, right? But it was still a 38% discount, and so it's just it's an interesting conversation to have with a lot of the owners because they're just like, well, at least we're going to bump it up that. And I was like, yeah, but you're still getting ripped off.
Right.
Like
and obviously, I know what we do with these folks,
Yep.
but maybe you could explain. So if let's say I call you
Yep.
and I go, hey, I want to get out of network or whatever, what are you going to do with me?
We're going to have a conversation and grab some data.
Okay.
To me, it's always if you could confront the situation, what's your real risk exposure? That's all I'm trying to show a guy, And so I did this example with a doctor last week. Like we did the whole pennies for premium care like pop-up thing, which was a lot of fun. And we talked to a lot of guys. But I met one, and he was willing to do
Pennies for premium care.
no more pennies for premium care.
Oh, it's a seminar you did.
Yeah, it was a seminar we did. It was great.
Like,
it was
that's
a lot
a cool
of fun.
title.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, yeah.
So I ended up having a meeting with the doctor, and he's like, I'm getting out of Delta. End of 2025.
Okay.
And I was like, great. I was like, well, do you have all the data? He's like, yeah, I've got the data. I was like, well, let's run the numbers, right? So we ran the numbers, and on average, his discount across his preventative, his basic, and his major services were about 50%. Wow. So when you came up with the insurance analyzer.
No, I know. That's why I'm having you explain it.
Yeah. So basically, if you can figure out how much money you gave away by having Delta, like what was the difference between my UCR and all that, right? Then you can calculate, well, how many fee-for-service patients do I need then to make the same amount of money, right? So, it's simple math. If my maximum fee is 100 and my discounted rate's 50%, then I only need 1 out of 2 Delta patients
to stay with the practice,
to still make the same amount of revenue. Right. I'd be significantly profitable, but we're not going to get into that. Good. So we run the numbers, and he's like blown away. He's like, "Oh my gosh! Like, so what you're telling me is half the practice could walk that has Delta, and I'd be okay." I was like, "In fact, you'd be more profitable,
right? Because you'd be working less. There'd be less material costs, less lab fees, less labor."
And he's like, "Oh my gosh, that's eye-opening. Like, so maybe I should start with Delta." I was like, no. I was like, no. That's
save that one for last.
Yeah, save that one. It's your big guy. Like we're going to start with the little ones. But if you can confront the situation data-wise, like he didn't have a whole lot of patients. It was only something like, I think it was like 514 Delta patients. So that means he needed
still a good amount.
It's a good amount. But at his worst case scenario, if every Delta patient left, he only needed like 250 fee-for-service patients.
Right.
So when I was like, hey, look, if 30% of the practice leaves, you're actually doing pretty good because your discount's 50%.
Right, because they're just as ahead, for those of you who are newer listeners, the average loss from a PPO is going to be 30% when you drop it.
And if you do it right, you might only lose 20.
Right.
So if you have the numbers and then you can take all of them and line them up, that's what we would do. We'd take all the numbers, line them up, like who's your biggest risk exposure by dollar value and by patient. And then we'd sort that list. And then we'd say, okay, this is where you should start. Like you're going to start with your 1% or 3% or 9%, whatever that insurance is. And then we're going to learn a lot from that. We're going to, figure out the things we're not doing properly and handling it, and then it'll make us better on the next letter that we write, and the next one, and the next one. So
you kind of walked him through this.
Yeah.
So what do you call that?
An insurance analysis.
Okay. So should we now?
Can.
And we do this at no charge.
You could do it at no charge. I mean,
I'll put a link to it if you're interested in because the problem a lot of guys are going to have, at least at what I've found, is you're going to have some people who are pretty together and they like figures and facts and whatever. I also find funny thing. And I don't know if this is just limited to dentists or doctors or just, I guess I could say the same thing. If all of a sudden you were to cut our seminars in half, like if we were involved in some type of, practice management training PPO, if you cut our seminar attendance in half and our course attendance in half, yet the revenues remain the same, right? Or actually went up with higher profitability, it would still freak me out a little bit.
Sure.
Because we're all the people. I don't feel busy.
Right.
Right? And I like people, so I like being around people. I'd much rather have a full seminar room than a half-full seminar room. So I think what happens is, they start dropping these plans and they see patients migrate out of the practice, albeit a small percentage. Mm-hmm. But again, we tend to focus on the negative anyway, just as human beings, right? So then people freak out that they're not as quote-unquote busy anymore, but they're not comparing that to the actual revenue and profitability.
Correct.
So someone will look at this, and it's not a small thing, and there's contracts involved and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of an overwhelming move for a lot of people. That's why I recommend they do something like this. I think we call it the fees and plans analysis.
Yeah, fees and plans analysis, insurance analysis. We call it fees and plans
Yeah,
analysis.
so I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. If you want to do one of those with Jeff, it is free.
Yeah.
And, we're getting close to the end of the year. Depending on when this episode airs. I don't know if this is going to be the before or after the new year. But take advantage of it. Launch yourself into 25 actually finally getting out of insurances.
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
I think it's great. And just have the numbers ready is really all I tell anybody. Mm-hmm. Because if you have the numbers, you're armed with a lot more information, especially your risk exposure.
Now, let's assume they don't have the numbers.
Yeah, they
only
You can
help them get the numbers.
I can help them get the
good,
numbers.
Good.
Yeah, it's super easy.
I might be listening going, what numbers are you talking about?
Really? All you need is your fee
The number
schedule.
is 6.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
But it can get complicated for sure. And that's what I went over.
Mainly you're looking for how many patients are in the plan, how much revenue they made from the plan, and then the fee schedule for the plan, right?
Yep.
which their software should be able to kick
Their
that.
software could kick out. It's pretty easy to get. And even if they don't have any of that, if you just know your fee versus your UCR, like the
Yeah, which they can get from their front
that's
desk.
super simple.
Okay, but you can walk them through
Yeah, I
this.
can walk them through it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that's problem number one.
Problem number one, insurance.
Okay, yeah, we're hearing that a lot more.
A lot, like a
You know,
lot.
this is our problem. We're kind of always too early.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
we were yelling about the recession and inflation in 2021.
Yeah,
and
nobody
people were like,
believed us.
What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
Right. And then we were talking about insurances, like, look, they're squeezing you or
Yeah.
whatever. And we had a few people talking about it, but now all of a sudden,
It's a huge thing. And I think it is a huge thing now just because of inflation. I think you could have gotten away continuing to play the game when there was a 1% to 2% rate of inflation and fees moved 1% to 2% and it was okay. But now, when you're paying a hygienist the same as an associate doctor, it's just not.
or you have to get an
Or
associate
need
because
to
you can't get a hygienist.
Yeah. You can't play the game like that anymore.
Got it. All right, so that's number one. What's number two?
Number two kind of is probably a result of number one, in my opinion. We hear a lot about hiring.
Okay,
Just
but
can't-
specifically hiring or staffing? What
staffing.
aspect?
Like I can't
finding people?
I can't find people. I can't find staff. I can't find quality staff. And
Is it a particular, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
is it a position like hygienist assistant or is it anybody?
it's anybody. I mean, everybody. Any general dentist right now, or perio is always. I can't find a hygienist, right? Like, and sure, I mean that's true. Like you're in competition for every hygienist that's out there, but also the other positions of the practice. They just can't seem to find people, and
Like they're getting no responses
no
from their
responses, or they. That's the problem. Like if you ask them, like, well, what are you doing? It's like, well, I'm going through the standard way of hiring, and you're just like, well, that's not gonna work. Number two, you're out of touch. Like you have no idea who you're competing with these days.
Do you see any commonality in what people consider to be like best practices for hiring that aren't workable?
Yeah, this idea that people need to have dental office experience.
Okay.
Like I hear that a lot, and I'm just like,
I mean, definitely for a hygienist,
that makes
I'm
sense.
messing with you.
Anybody who requires a license, definitely. Yeah. Okay. You
That's
do
always
need.
my favorite.
But do
Whenever
you
anybody
need experience?
When somebody puts a hygiene ad out, you always get, I'd like applying for the hygiene position. Okay, good. Are you a hygienist? No, but I'd love to be one.
I'd love to be one. Do you need a license for that? Can you just teach me on the fly? Like, no. But every state is different. In Washington, D.C., for years, the dental assistants, surgical assistants didn't have a requirement for like X-ray certification. So we just trained them ourselves.
Right.
So anything that needs a license, I guess the way to put it is, as few requirements necessary, like the fewer requirements necessary, the easier it is to find people.
Got it.
So the more requirements you put in, you're just limiting your population.
So they really have to zero in on what's really required.
Yeah, what's
I think, who was that told me this? And I mentioned it before. I think it was Chris or Sabri. Chris Mankhouse or Sabri. Everybody knows Sabri. I think I've had Chris on this show before once or twice. When they have clients place ads for hygienists, they have them not put any filters.
Yeah, just
Because the more filters they take the filters off and they get, like on Indeed, they'll get a ton of responses then. But there were people that were being filtered out that were licensed, RDHs, but for some reason just weren't showing up if they put filters like they had to have a license.
right.
Like maybe the person who applied didn't put, I have a license, right?
Right.
Even though they did, so they didn't show up. So
Wild, right?
it's kind of ridiculous.
It's a little thing. I mean, so you hear hygiene a lot, but then you also hear the rest of the practice, like admin teams or dental assistants. There's also not enough emphasis put on the front end of the office, in my opinion. Almost every office I talk to is significantly or severely understaffed up
Really?
front.
Okay.
And the office then is super stressed. I mean, like unbelievably stressed. Like once you have an admin team that's understaffed, like the rest of the practice is eventually going to feel it. Like we've got holes in the schedule, but nobody to call. Where's our AR? Why is it out of control? I can't follow up on that and check people in.
Right.
Like where's the money? Well, I forgot to collect it. What about the lab? So we see that, but the hiring of those positions are not done in a way that I would recommend, that you would recommend, that the company recommends. It's kind of like when I need somebody, I'm looking. And that's just too late.
Right.
And also, you compete now with the likes of Starbucks and Whole Foods and
Right.
Target, and they offer better money,
Better benefits.
better benefits, consistency.
One, I think also with the big corporation, it depends on the person.
Yeah.
Some people are more entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Others are not. But if someone's looking for like a stable long-term career with upward mobility, they may want to go big to a big corporation at that point because they can start small and work their way up into corporate.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known lots of people like that.
Or it's just better pay.
Right.
Like, there's so many doctors I talk to that they're like, well, yeah, my staff member just left me, for a position down the road. I was like, I mean, can you blame them? I mean, a gallon of milk's what, like $7 or $8? Like if you're going to get $1 more an hour or $2 more an hour.
Right. And they have kids.
And
or
you got
whatever,
kids,
yeah.
like I'm taking it. I'm sorry. Like and my loyalty only goes so far, So they're just, in my opinion, not in tune with the rest of their competition. They think they're competing against their fellow doctor. They're competing against major corporations. And because they don't have money, because they gave it away to the insurance companies, they're getting a little bit stingy on
Well, they're
staffing.
getting squeezed.
Yeah, they're getting squeezed hard.
But then let's take a look at this for a second. So here I am. I'm not the only one having a problem finding good staff.
Right.
So is the guy down the street and the girl around the corner and the other person in the high rise over there. And then there's also the big corporations in the area that are now paying more than they used to and have better bennies than I do. And we're all looking for people.
Yep.
We're all looking for people. So I think the first thing I would want to be able to do in order to compete is I'd have to know, like, what the heck are people getting paid today?
Yeah.
And I used to recommend salary.com, and I don't anymore. Not because I have anything against them, but I think they didn't keep up. I didn't look recently.
I haven't either. I mean, I used to just go out and check Indeed a bit.
That's actually how I do it now, because I went to I had a client in you know who this is. I won't mention names, but he was in Southern California, and there was a guy not far from another client that I was talking to, and he told me, this other client in the same area in Southern California told me he had just hired a hygienist, this is a few years ago, at $65 an hour. And I'm like, well, how much were you paying in 2019? It was like 42 or something, right? So then I went, we had this other client near this client, and he just can't find a hygienist for the life of him. So I go on salary.com, put in their zip code. Normally it would give me the low, median, and high. The high for that zip was $55. The median was 40-something. So I don't think they updated. I think that things were changing so fast that salary.com couldn't keep up. So like you, I just then went to Indeed and I looked and like, what are people paying in this area for this position? There were lots of people looking for a hygienist. 60 to 65 bucks was very common. I saw that client's ad for $50 or $55.
just going to skip it.
Well, then to top it off, a lot of corporate offices were offering signing bonuses.
Yeah.
Like these people are LeBron or something like this,
yeah,
right?
it's like,
Yeah, we're gonna sign you as a hygienist.
Yeah,
Are they gonna do-
25,000.
They're going to do a press conference?
Yeah.
No, it was 4 or 5K.
yeah,
But-
fine print, but it's still.
But here's where it got interesting. So then, I'm like, okay, this is curious, right? So I started looking around other areas. And what's funny, Indeed's a great source to use for that in that, so I go look at the time, it was Miami, right? Look at Miami-Dade area, what's the hygiene market like there? No signing bonuses. Salaries were less than people are paying here in the Tampa-St. Pete area. So it's supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
Eventually the economy is going to take care of itself,
That's
right?
right.
So there's a lot of hygienists down there, but that's why we had clients in this area
Right.
having trouble finding a hygienist. I said, well, what I would do is advertise in South Florida.
Yeah.
Want to move to the Tampa-St. Pete area? Because they're all licensed in Florida.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself where you're getting squeezed, number one, I would want to know, well, what are people paying a treatment coordinator, a schedule coordinator, a receptionist? Because then I at least have to match that. And then two, if there's a particular position, like I know assistants and hygienists have been definitely a problem the last few years. Obviously, I'm going to want to train assistants as much as I'm legally capable of doing so, which a lot of people can and just get them X-ray certified.
Yeah.
You just find somebody who's got a good aptitude and
That's
wants to be an assistant.
Yeah.
But for hygienists, you might find, and again, this isn't necessarily the case, but let's say I'm in the LA area and there's no hygienist. Well, I might look at the other metro areas in California, look in San Diego, Northern Cal. There might be somebody who fits the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, there are a lot of ways.
Yeah, and then, heck, you could even make part of the package instead of signing bonus, you do moving costs.
There are so many ways to be creative,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just one of the areas of the practice that a lot of owners, and rightfully so, like I understand it, and I'm not trying to, criticize them. They just kind of throw their arms up and they're like, hey man, like it's kind of working now. I don't have the attention span to also stay every Wednesday night to do interviews to find people.
That's why they need an office manager.
That's why you need an office manager. So, but hiring is a huge issue of finding the right people. Like, and it's just take hygiene out of it. Like, okay, fine, hygienist, but then also just finding admin staff,
Right.
and that's just, in my opinion, just not enough frequency. There's just isn't enough attention put on it, and a lot of the doctors, if there's no squeakiness going on, there's you're not going to put any oil on that wheel, right? So if the staff aren't coming to you and they're like, hey, we're not able to do this, which they won't, by the way.
Of course.
But it's funny because when I talk to a lot of doctors, I was like, how are you? Well, my staff are stressed. They're frustrated. I could see it in their faces. And I'm like, good, what are you doing? And what do I do? I'm like, well, they're gonna quit soon.
Yeah,
they're looking
to become too toxic.
Yeah, they're gonna look for jobs. So I always tell everybody you should always be hiring. Always be closing. But always be hiring, and you can't stop hiring no matter what. No matter when you're fully staffed.
Well, it's also what people forget, like when they're placing an ad for employees, they're marketing.
They're marketing.
That's
yeah.
marketing.
Yeah.
So you got to know how to market a little bit to get good employees.
You really do. Yeah. And there's some of these ads they'll have me look at once in a while. When a client comes on board and we do some of their onboarding and their first meets and meet and greet things, like depending on what we want to do, they might say, hey, I'm looking. I was like, the message in your ad is going to attract the wrong person.
Right.
So you definitely have to do something different. I've been working with this other group. They're great. I mean, it's a massive office. And they have 5 hygienists. They've got 3 doctors. And they've got 4 people up front.
Oof.
And I'm talking to the office manager. I mean, they're coming out. They're a client now. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, are you stressed? She's like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I don't even know how. I was like, well, what about, I can't deal with insurance now. And I'm like, okay, good. So I was like, you guys need to be hiring like now, like today. So it's just one of those things. I think it's a combination of 2 things. One, I don't think the doctor sometimes is aware how understaffed they actually are.
Right.
Which then leads to staff leaving because they are stressed, they are overworked, and you're underpaid. $2 more an hour, $1 more an hour is fantastic. And 2, they don't put the attention on really looking for always be hiring, my idea.
Well, I think there's a couple things here I'm thinking as you're talking. Number one, so let's say I'm out here listening right now.
Yeah.
And I go, do I not have enough staff? Do I have too many staff?
Yeah.
Is this something that I could call you about and you could help me with?
Yeah. We'll go through. We'll take a look at your staffing metrics versus production. We'll find out dollar values. Where could you afford it? Why aren't these people doing anything else? Like you added staff, but they're not adding value.
Right.
Yeah, this is stuff we look at.
All right, so we'll put your email on the episode webpage. The other thing to think with here, too, is I think what goes missing is, let's say I've got an understaffed front desk.
Yeah.
Well, they're keeping up with the current traffic.
That's about it.
But they're not building the practice.
That's right.
They're not able to reach out. They're not calling all of my patients who are slowly going inactive.
Right.
The 3,000 patients who've been in the last couple of years are just not getting called.
Yeah.
The incomplete treatment list is not getting worked at all. None of that's happening. We're just handling the incoming whatever. I mean, theoretically, we could be losing half of our income like that.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. I mean, we've seen, I know you, it's funny, like we're going to talk now because you and I talk sometimes. You hate when I say some of those things. But I'm going to say it anyway. I issue challenges to a lot of doctors, when we're at the new patient workshop.
Yes.
One of these challenges is their attrition rate challenge.
Yeah.
I'm like, I will bet anybody here like $500 right now that if you open up your database right now from today ending date to last year same date, that I guarantee you 40% of those patients do not have an appointment into the future.
Okay.
They're in your reactivation list. They're in your, your recall program somewhere.
So let's say it's November 10th.
Yep.
You're saying, okay, good. So I'm going to pull a list from November 10th of last year to now.
Yep.
and you're betting me
Yeah.
that at least 40% of the patients that have been in the practice in the last year do not have a next visit date after today.
Yep.
Okay, fair enough.
And it must be so. Like, it doesn't mathematically. It's the only explanation for how are you getting 50 patients a month, but you haven't added any days of hygiene.
How often do you win that bet?
No one would ever take me up on it.
No one ever took you
No
up
one
on it?
ever takes me up on it.
Then how do you know if you're going to win or not?
I'm always going to win.
Okay.
I just know. I've done it enough with enough doctors where I've been doing some of the reactivation with them.
You don't
where
do
I've
it as a bet. You'll
I
have
do
them
it-
give you the
yeah.
numbers, and then you'll point out, okay, 50% of your practice
Yeah,
is gone.
yeah.
But don't the staff usually underestimate and the doctor overestimates? Like if you say
yeah.
how many people have a next visit date, the doctor's like, oh, at least 85%. The staff are like 10%.
They're like 10%.
Doctor's super optimistic about it.
Doctor's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
We book everybody.
Yeah,
you
the
know,
staff
no one
like,
leaves without
no,
an
they
appointment.
don't.
Yeah, it's like,
so
the staff's
funny.
like, what are you talking about? I was, you know, and that's true of most practices where it's like you have no idea how amazing. Like, some doctors don't really appreciate how amazing some of their staff are. Where, you know, they're complaining about the hole in the schedule today for the hygienist.
Sure.
And like the front's like, dude, you have no idea what dumpster fire we walked into today. We had one person on this schedule. We managed to get 6 more in, you know. And that happens on a regular basis.
Right.
You know. But that's like you said, that's a hiring issue, because if you're just handling day-to-day operations, anything that slips through the crack, you are not staffed to then pick up.
Right. You need to be able to be staffed to continuously reach out from the business
That's right.
to follow up to people who are not in the business today or are not going to take the initiative to call you.
And that is a ton of wasted energy, promo dollars, like opportunity, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It's there to be had. A lot of these practices are absolute gold mines. And I hate to reference it as money, but I mean, there's an opportunity to help a lot more people that we are constantly trying to attract them in the front door. And then, like, we're going to the back door and opening it up
Right.
twice as wide and just shooing people out.
Well, and then they end up essentially becoming a specialist as a GP.
It's
They're
just-
living off
yeah,
their new patients.
Yeah. Or we need new patients because all of our existing patients are clean. It's the things.
That's only because the top tier of patients are coming in.
coming in, right? The guys that never have any problems.
Yeah, wild.
So,
All right, so if folks are having trouble with this, they want to
Yep.
know, like, what should I do? Do I need staff? Do I not need staff? This is a call they can
Yeah.
make to you. I'll put the...
put it in. Yeah,
Yeah.
come on. Let's have a meeting. Let's talk about it.
okay, perfect.
Talking's free.
All right, so let's get to number 3. Now,
Number 3.
Problem number 3. This is based on your collating all the data you
All the
have.
data,
So
yeah.
you had insurance, you got, notice I'm extending this,
Yeah.
insurance, staffing. Number 3 kind of took me by surprise. So
Yeah,
why
it
don't you
took
tell
me.
everybody what it was?
Scheduling. Just problems with scheduling productively.
Funny.
It was.
So
It's
a lot of people complaining about their schedule.
it's fallen apart, and you know.
Do these
They're on-
people have a system, or is it
They-
like
yeah.
open slot equals put person in
Yeah,
slot?
that's what it is.
Got it.
So
they have no system.
They have no system. They do have a system, but okay, now it comes like everything is connected. In my opinion, it's all connected to the amount of energy or income or profit that you can put back into the practice to train the staff properly, to find the time to do that.
I see.
You cannot do that when you're having a $2 million practice in production and you're going to take home $150,000 this year.
Because you're writing off.
You're writing it off.
300,000.
You're running around. You're on roller skates.
Right.
So scheduling comes up a lot, the inefficiency of it, and the fact that there's days where they're like, man, I didn't get to eat today, and we didn't produce more than $1,000.
Wow.
Like, I don't know what happened to today. And then there's days where it's like, I feel like I'm sitting around and we did $8,000. So there's this inefficiency of scheduling, and
It's like Sabrina and I were visiting a client just recently.
Yeah.
And we're looking at their schedule, and it was either me or Sabrina pointed out, like, the schedule's supposed to be a schedule. It's not a suggestion.
it's just become a suggestion.
Yeah, so if a procedure takes an hour and a half, you schedule it for an hour and
Right.
a half. You don't schedule it for an hour hoping that everything's going to go perfectly, even though it's never gone that fast before.
Not once.
Because then you're going to end up in a situation where you don't really have a schedule.
No.
Right.
And then you're just upsetting people.
Well, and it also just makes it tough on you, the
Yeah.
doc. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just feel stressed out, and you feel like you're,
I've gotta get
you
to
know,
this, and I'm
everything's
behind.
an emergency.
Yeah, it's-
well, everything, well, not in a dental sense,
Right,
but it's
but-
just you're constantly operating like you're in panic mode.
Yeah. It's one of these interesting things. And when you talk to the doctors about the scheduling problem, it's kind of like, I don't know what they're doing.
Right.
It's like they found an open slot and they just shoved a patient in there. And I was like, you know what? Where's your policy on what to do? Like, do you have a manual? No. I was like, well, then they're doing the best they can.
Well, so you're hearing this a lot. I guess this is the question is how many people are saying, like, I have zero scheduling system. Like, I just have nothing. My schedule is I'm open from 8 to 4, 4 days a week, and we put people on the schedule. Obviously, they have some type of a system for hygiene because hygiene appointments take a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But do they have, like, I mean by no system, meaning we do these types of procedures at this time.
No. I would say 80% of the people we talk to have zero policy in writing on how their practice schedule should operate.
You know what's shocking about that?
Yeah.
So if you talk to a doctor in the 1990s or early 2000s, I would say at least 50% had a system. They were used to some system, like there's primary, secondary, tertiary procedures. We're doing primary procedures in the morning.
Yep.
That was where that all came from.
Yep.
Tell the patient that the doctor does these procedures in the morning because that's when they're freshest, which I'm like, please don't ever say that.
Don't ever say that.
Because I'm going to end up getting 4 crowns done at 6 p.m.
Right.
And then I'm going to be like, is the doctor like really upset and pissed off and tired now? Like,
that drill looks scary.
yeah, exactly,
You know?
shaken.
Yeah.
So... But most people at least had been exposed to a system like that.
Yeah, so let me rephrase.
The bigger problem was they had been exposed and they couldn't implement.
That's right.
Or the staff couldn't get patients to show up in the morning or something like that. But you're saying these guys don't even have a system.
They've been exposed to systems. They know of the systems. They know that, they should do they have this idea, but if I ask them...
So they know a system, like kind of like Bigfoot or the Chupacabra?
It exists.
Like it exists, but I've never seen it?
I don't know, but... Since there's no policies like in writing on how to operate the schedule, then it's kind of just it's an exercise in like theory a bit. You're just like, theoretically, how should we operate the schedule? Well, Dr. Smith says we should do X, Y, and Z. Do you do that? Well, we do that till we got a hole, and then we just throw somebody in here, and we're just gonna. So, and that to me, again, comes down to, there's parts of the practice that lead to these issues, as you know, and you've probably spent multiple episodes talking about the fact that if a patient's not sold, they don't come in. If they're not sold, they don't come in.
I've
then
done
they don't
episodes
come back.
on the scheduling system.
It's like
we have that stuff everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. So most offices, when I talk to doctors, also this comes down, and I get it, and I'm not trying to rag on the doctors here. I totally understand that they want to be a dentist, but the minute they sign their loan docs and they sign the practice documents, they're owners, and the responsibility of ownership is to ensure the success of the practice, also the efficiencies,
stable growth, and success
smoothness,
of the business.
Right? One of these things is like, well, how do people get into a schedule, and then how do you correct it? Like, if we're gonna do $8,000 a day, how do you foresee yourself doing that?
Right.
And what's the plan? And when you come up with that, is it real? There's a lot of guys I talk to. I'm like, what's your goal? Our goal is $15,000 a day. I was like, how many chairs do you have? They're like 3. I was like, okay, that's like the maximum. What are you doing on average? 2. And I'm like, okay. I was like, so it's an unrealistic goal. Sure. Like, what are we doing? How did you come to that goal? And is it possible to achieve that goal on its current setup and staffing requirements? Okay, it's not. But there's no policy then.
Right.
And so then the schedules fall apart. The doctors are frustrated. They're sitting around. Kind of one of those things I'll ask them is like, how many hours are you working a week? And it's like, well, I'm here Monday through Thursday, and I do 8 hours or 4 hours of admin on Friday. I was like, good. How many hours do you think of your 4 days are wasted? Oh, anywhere from like 4 to 8 hours.
That's like a whole day.
It's a whole day. Now it's spread out in 10-minute increments, 20-minute increments. Here's another 30-minute increment. Somebody cancels. So when you look at it, you're kind of like 4 hours. You're like, could you lose 4 hours in 4 days? Yeah, easily, like without a doubt.
Well, what's funny about this too is, most people have switched to a 10-minute book instead of 15-minute intervals, right? Or slots, whatever you want to call them. If you're going to run on 10-minute intervals, the amount of control and expertise required to properly schedule the office and to make it efficient the person up front needs to know what they're doing
Yes.
in order to make that work. And you can take an office, just if you schedule it correctly, you can take, like you said, 4 days of work and turn it into 2.5.
That's right.
Which then opens up all that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that one's come up again.
yeah.
Everything kind of cycles.
That one hasn't come up as a top 3,
Right.
for me at least. It's usually new patients, revenue or profitability. Insurances come up off and on in the sense that people hate them.
Yep.
But it's never come up as like the number one problem is dental insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always been like new patients, staff,
Right.
and profitability. Those are like the big 3 usually.
Yeah. And maybe one of these will fall out in the next 6 months or a year, but it was shocking how many guys, were talking about the inefficiency of the schedule and how many people were interested in talking and hearing about a solution for it. So
let's talk solutions for a second.
Yeah.
So we have a few.
yeah.
Number one, we have a seminar that we do for free.
Yeah.
And we do it about, once every few months?
I would say, it's every few months, the art of scheduling productively.
Art of Scheduling Productively.
Yeah.
We also have a similar version of that on our online platform.
Yeah.
DDS Success. I'll put a link to that as well. So you can do the free one with Jeff. You can do the one on the online platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we also have kind of the big definitive seminar we do here at our
Yeah,
NGE,
it's really
which
nice.
is called Scheduling for Production, which is 2 days long. That we only do, I think we do it 2 or
Twice.
3 times a year.
Yeah, twice a year.
I'll put a link to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, gosh, when people really implement this thing,
Yeah.
the change is really marked. It is big.
Yeah, it's big. And it's given them the idea of time studies,
Right.
which are huge. It's given them the idea of how much the primary block should contain and
Right.
at what point, and policies you guys we hand out so much free stuff.
Well, the thing I like about ours is that we don't just, because, I could sit here and go, this is what an ideal schedule looks like.
yeah.
It's sort of like somebody who's completely out of shape, and then I'm looking at some fitness model. This is how an ideal body looks like. I'm like, I'm never going to get there, right? We don't do that. We instead tell them, okay, here's what we're going to do Monday
Yeah.
to start moving to, because there's a point where you are point A and you want to get to point B. How do we get from point A to point B? And we do it in doable steps as opposed to, here you go, figure it out.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Feeling lucky?
Yeah, exactly.
No. Well, that's so funny though, scheduling. I know when you told me that, I was shocked.
Yeah, it was. Even I was shocked because, like you said, we used to hear. I mean, we still hear new patient. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And it's every new patient you could just funnel.
Well, new patient's always going to be
But like that one popping up was
scheduling was funny.
Yeah, scheduling is, and it's the same that it was when Dr. Winteregg was talking about it. It's the
That's
same.
why we had the Greg did the scheduling
Yeah.
DVD
Oh
back in
my
the day.
gosh,
Yeah.
And we'll still go through the system and how to, but the thing that we're going to teach him at the art of scheduling productively is like it doesn't matter what system you can go get. You could have our system. You could have the what is the rock, pebble, sand system. They have all the primary. They have all these differences. But if you put people into a schedule the same way in any system, it's like the definition of insanity.
But then you also have to get the people to do it.
You gotta do
which,
it.
That's another important thing. That's
you
got
to do it, and you got to have the policies. And it's see what I mean. It all comes back. It's all the same thing. We don't have money. We don't hire the right staff. We don't take the time to write the training manuals. We don't then create the system. We don't put the people in. We don't write these things that someone can come and look at. So a lot of times where I'll ask these guys at the workshop, I'm like, hey, what happens if this is done wrong? Like, what are you pointing them to show them to do it right? I'm just talking to them. I'm just like, well.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, that's not going to work very well. Like, if it's how are you going to ever correct anybody? How are you going to train anybody if it's not a written policy? So it comes back to they're all interconnected.
No, it makes sense. Makes total sense.
But the art of scheduling productively is fantastic, and there is something that you can do about it to commit people to that schedule that you're laying out.
Right.
But it does have to make sense. You should be able to take lunch. If you want to work 7:30 to 4 every day and have an hour lunch, then
You also have to have time to sell.
Yep.
Yeah. And we have all this.
We have all of it,
So I'll
right?
put the links to it on the page.
But it was an interesting one that just came up this quarter that I just started hearing more and more about. So,
Funny. Well, I think it's timely
Yeah.
because, we're rolling into the new year.
Yeah.
This is when people, we've elected this time period to make changes.
Yeah.
Like we're towards the end of the year, so we're going to hold off on making a change. We're going to make a change in January.
Yes.
So, as you're considering these, there's a good chance that one or two or all three of these are affecting you in some way. So I put the links on the episode webpage. I would definitely advise that you guys contact Jeff. He can help you.
Yeah.
Or someone here in Jeff's department.
Yeah, someone on my team.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
But also, otherwise, I think that pretty much hits it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I think those are three great things. If they can start to address next year, they have their best year.
Well, they could even start this year.
They should.
I mean,
start
again,
this
I
year.
don't know the exact air dates. This is a problem.
Yeah. So
If it's still this year, you can do it this year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's next year.
we're gonna do. Just do it. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, fair enough.
There you go.
Well, Jeff, thank you for being on.
Yeah,
I really
thanks for
appreciate
having
it,
me.
man. Yeah. So, folks, that's what we have for you this week. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you want to know more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Don't forget we have the links that were mentioned in the episode on the episode webpage. Other than that, please have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.